Have you ever had a moment where a single text message shattered your entire world? Where 23 words on a phone screen made you question everything you thought you knew about love, family, and trust? That moment came for me on a Tuesday morning at 8:47 a.m. I was sitting in my kitchen, sipping coffee from the mug my son Matthew had given me last Mother's Day, the one that said "World's Best Mom" in fading gold letters. The irony of that moment still haunts me. My phone buzzed. A simple notification. Nothing unusual. I expected it to be Matthew confirming dinner plans, or maybe Emily, my daughter-in-law, asking about my doctor's appointment. Instead, I read these words: "Mom, you won't be joining us on the family cruise. Emily thinks it's better to keep it just family this time." Just family. I stared at that phrase until the letters seemed to blur together. My hands began to shake, not the gentle tremor of age, but the violent trembling of someone whose world had just tilted off its axis. Just family. As if I wasn't family. As if the woman who gave birth to him, raised him, sacrificed everything for him, was somehow an outsider looking in. But here's what made it worse, what made my blood turn to ice in my veins: this message came from the same son I had just given a fully paid house to. Not a down payment. Not help with the mortgage. The entire house. $350,000 of my life savings, handed over with a smile and a hug. "It's my gift to you both," I had said, tears of joy streaming down my face as I handed him the deed. Every parent dreams of giving their child a foundation for their future. Matthew had hugged me so tight that day. Emily had cried, calling me the most generous mother-in-law in the world. They promised I'd always have a room there, always be welcome. That was 4 months ago. 4 months. Now I wasn't even family enough for their vacation. I typed back the only word I could manage: "Okay." 1 word. 4 letters. But in my heart, I was screaming. I was good enough to buy your house, but not good enough to sit at your dinner table? Good enough to drain my retirement account, but not good enough to breathe the same ocean air as you? My coffee had gone cold. The morning sun that had seemed so warm minutes before now felt harsh, exposing. The kitchen, my kitchen, in the home I'd lived in for 30 years, suddenly felt foreign. Then my phone buzzed again. Emily this time, with her perfectly crafted follow-up message: "I hope you understand, Olivia. It's just simpler this way for everyone." Simpler. Of course it was simpler, Emily. Everything's simpler when you've already gotten what you needed from someone. Simpler when the bank account you've been eyeing is finally empty. Simpler when the woman who trusted you with everything has served her purpose. I set the phone down and walked to my living room window. Outside, the world continued as normal. Cars drove by. A neighbor walked their dog. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. But inside this house where I'd raised Matthew, where I'd nursed him through childhood illnesses, where I'd taught him to ride a bike and helped him with homework, something fundamental had died. It wasn't just hurt. Hurt, I could have handled. I'd been hurt before. Disappointed before. This was recognition. Cold, clear recognition of what I had become to them. I had become useful. A resource. A problem solver. The person you call when you need something fixed, funded, or forgotten. But not a person deserving of respect, love, or basic human dignity. For 28 years, I had been Matthew's mother. I had sacrificed my own dreams, my own comfort, my own financial security to ensure his happiness. When his father died 5 years ago, I had become both parents to him. When he married Emily, I had welcomed her as the daughter I never had. When they needed help with student loans, I paid them off. When they wanted a better car, I co-signed the loan. When Emily decided she wanted to redecorate, I funded it with a smile. When they dreamed of homeownership but couldn't afford it, I bought them a house. A house. Not a gift card. Not a vacation. A house. And now, I wasn't family. I walked back to the kitchen and picked up my phone, scrolling through our text history. For months, the messages had been getting shorter. More distant. More transactional. Can you watch Rex this weekend? Need help with the utility deposit. Emily's car is making that noise again. When had I become their personal ATM with legs? When had I love you, Mom become can you help us with? When had my son learned to love my wallet more than my heart? I closed my eyes and tried to remember the last time Matthew had called just to talk. Just to check on me. Just to say he was thinking of me. I couldn't. But I could remember every time he'd called asking for something. Every time Emily had shown up with that sweet smile and some new emergency that required my immediate financial attention. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had been managing me. Carefully. Strategically. Keeping me just close enough to be useful, just distant enough to be disposable. And I had let them. Standing in that kitchen, holding that phone, reading those messages, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt angry. Not hurt. Not disappointed. Angry. They had gambled with my love, and they thought they had won. They had no idea the game was just beginning. That night, sleep was impossible. I wandered through my house like a ghost haunting her own life. Every room held memories that now felt tainted, every photograph on the wall seemed to mock me with false smiles and hollow promises. In the hallway hung a picture from Matthew's graduation. There I was, beaming with pride, my arm around my son as he held his diploma. Emily stood on his other side, radiant in a yellow sundress I had bought for her because she'd mentioned loving the color. "You're the best mom in the world," Matthew had said that day. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I touched the glass frame with my fingertip. When had those words become a lie? Walking into the living room, I stopped at the mantelpiece where their wedding photo used to sit. I had taken it down 2 weeks ago, though I couldn't explain why at the time. Now I knew. Some part of me had been preparing for this moment long before my conscious mind caught up. The empty space where the photo once sat looked cleaner somehow. Honest. I made my way to what used to be Matthew's childhood bedroom. I had kept it exactly as he left it when he moved out for college, the baseball trophies, the model airplanes we built together, the Superman poster he begged me to buy when he was 8 years old. "Promise me you'll never change this room, Mom," he had said before leaving for college. "I want to know I can always come home." But where was home now? The house I gave him? Or this room that held the ghost of the boy he used to be before Emily reshaped him into someone I barely recognized? I sat on his old bed, running my hand over the Star Wars comforter. This was where I had read him bedtime stories, where I had sat when he was sick with fever, where we had talked about his dreams of becoming an astronaut, then a baseball player, then a teacher like his father. When had those dreams been replaced by schemes to drain his mother's bank account? My phone buzzed from the kitchen. For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe it was Matthew calling to apologize, to say Emily had made a mistake, that of course I was invited. Instead, it was a notification from my bank. An automatic alert about a large transaction. My blood went cold. I rushed to the kitchen and grabbed my phone, opening the banking app with trembling fingers. There it was, a withdrawal of $5,000 from my checking account. The memo line read Home Emergency Repairs M.N.E. Gardner. M.N.E. Gardner. Matthew and Emily Gardner. But there had been no emergency. No phone call asking permission. No explanation at all. I scrolled through my transaction history, my heart pounding harder with each swipe. How had I not noticed before? How had I been so blind? There were dozens of them. Small withdrawals, perfectly timed to avoid suspicion. $500 here for groceries, $800 there for car maintenance, $1,200 for medical expenses. Each one authorized by someone with access to my account. Someone I had trusted completely. The room started to spin. I gripped the kitchen counter, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't just about being excluded from a cruise. This wasn't just hurt feelings or family drama. This was theft. Systematic, calculated, ongoing theft. I thought back to 6 months ago when Emily had offered to help me manage my online banking. "These websites are so confusing, Olivia," she had said with that sweet, concerned voice. "Why don't you let me help you set up automatic payments? It'll be so much easier for you." I had been grateful. Relieved, even. Managing finances online had always intimidated me, and Emily seemed so capable, so caring. She had sat right here at this kitchen table, typing on my laptop, asking me for passwords and account numbers. "Just for emergencies," she had assured me. "In case something happens and you need help." I had watched her work, admiring how quickly she navigated the complex banking websites. She had seemed like such a blessing, a daughter-in-law who cared enough to help her aging mother-in-law with confusing technology. Now I realized I had been watching her build the perfect trap. The worst part? She had been so careful about it. Never taking too much at once. Never enough to trigger an overdraft or make me suspicious. Just small, steady amounts that slowly bled me dry while she smiled across my dinner table and called me Mom. I scrolled further back in my account history. The pattern became clearer the more I looked. The withdrawals had started small, $200 here, $300 there. But as months passed, they had grown bolder. Larger amounts. More frequent. They had been testing me. Seeing how much they could take before I noticed. And I hadn't noticed. Not once. I had been too trusting, too grateful for their attention, too desperate to remain useful in their lives. My hands shook as I calculated the total. Over the past 6 months, they had stolen nearly $18,000 from me. $18,000 taken quietly, systematically, while they sat in my living room and let me serve them dinner. While they planned vacations I wasn't invited to. While they lived in the house I had bought for them with my life savings. I set the phone down and stared out the kitchen window into the darkness. In the reflection, I could see myself, a woman who looked older than her years, worn down by grief and betrayal and the terrible realization that the people she loved most had been preying on her. But as I stared at that reflection, something else began to emerge. Behind the hurt, behind the shock, behind the devastating recognition of how thoroughly I had been used, there was something harder. Something sharper. Determination. They thought I was weak. They thought I was naive. They thought I was a helpless old woman who would never fight back, never question, never stand up for herself. They thought I would just sit here in this empty house, surrounded by memories of the son who used to love me, and quietly disappear from their lives now that my bank account was empty. They were wrong. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the small address book I kept in my nightstand drawer. My finger traced down the page until I found what I was looking for, Martha's phone number. Martha had been my best friend for over 30 years. She had warned me about Emily from the beginning, though she had been gentle about it. "Something about that girl doesn't sit right with me," she had said after Matthew's wedding. "She watches you too closely when you talk about money." I had dismissed Martha's concerns then. I had wanted so badly to believe in the family I thought I was gaining. Now I wished I had listened. I looked at the clock, 11:47 p.m. Too late to call tonight, but first thing in the morning, I would dial that number. Because Martha had been right about Emily from the start. And I had a feeling she would know exactly what I needed to do next. The next morning, I called Martha before I had even finished my first cup of coffee. She answered on the second ring, her voice instantly alert despite the early hour. "Olivia? What's wrong?" That's the thing about true friends, they know. They can hear the cracks in your voice, the weight behind a simple hello, the urgency in the way you breathe before you speak. "I need you to come over," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Can you come now?" "I'm already getting dressed," she replied without hesitation. 20 minutes. Martha had always been like that. No questions when it mattered, no hesitation when someone she loved was drowning. She had been there when my husband Richard died, holding my hand through the funeral arrangements and the months of grief that followed. She had been there when Matthew got married, quietly raising an eyebrow at Emily's behavior but never saying "I told you so" when her concerns proved justified. She had been the only constant in my life when everything else was shifting and changing and ultimately betraying me. Exactly 18 minutes later, I heard her car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I watched her hurry up my front walk, her silver hair catching the morning light, her face set with the kind of determined concern that only comes from decades of friendship. I opened the door before she could knock. "Tell me," she said simply, stepping inside and setting her purse on the hall table. No pleasantries. No small talk. Just the direct, honest approach that had defined our friendship for 30 years. I handed her my phone with the banking app still open. Martha took it without a word, her reading glasses appearing from somewhere in her cardigan pocket with the efficiency of a woman who had spent her career as a high school principal. She scrolled through the transaction history in silence, her jaw tightening with each swipe. After several minutes, she looked up at me. Her eyes held a mixture of anger and something else, validation, maybe. The look of someone whose worst suspicions had just been confirmed. "How long has this been going on?" she asked quietly. 6 months. Maybe longer. I only noticed last night after. I swallowed hard. After they told me I wasn't invited on their cruise. Martha's eyebrows shot up. "Their cruise? The one you probably paid for?" "I don't know. Maybe. I can't tell anymore what I paid for and what I didn't." She set the phone down on my kitchen table and studied my face with the intensity of a woman who had spent decades reading teenagers' lies and evasions. "Olivia, tell me everything. From the beginning." So I did. I told her about the text message that had shattered my world. About the house I had bought for them, the entire house, free and clear. About Emily's gradual takeover of my financial management, presented as helpful assistance for a confused older woman. About the withdrawal I had discovered, and all the others that came before it. Martha listened in silence, her face growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and shook her head slowly. "They've been planning this," she said finally. "This isn't opportunistic, Olivia. This is systematic. They've been setting you up for months, maybe years." "You think Matthew knows?" Martha's expression softened slightly. I could see her weighing her words, trying to balance honesty with kindness. "Honey, either he knows and he's complicit, or he's willfully blind because it benefits him. Either way." She didn't need to finish. "Either way, my son was not the man I thought he was. You remember what I said at their wedding reception?" Martha continued. "About Emily watching you too closely when money came up?" I nodded. "It wasn't just curiosity, Olivia. She was calculating. She was figuring out exactly how much you were worth and how she could get access to it. And Matthew." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Matthew learned a long time ago that you would always bail him out, always say yes, always choose him over your own well-being. Emily just weaponized that knowledge." The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. For years, I had made myself indispensable to Matthew by solving his problems with money. I had trained him to see me as a resource rather than a person. Emily had simply taken that dynamic and perfected it. "What do I do?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Martha leaned forward, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she had used to command respect from thousands of students over the years. "First, you protect yourself. Right now. Today. Before they can take another penny." She stood up and began pacing my kitchen, her mind clearly racing. "You need to change every password, close every joint account, revoke any access they have to your finances. Then you need to document everything, every unauthorized withdrawal, every lie they told to get access, every promise they broke. But what if I'm wrong? What if there's an explanation? Olivia. Martha's voice cut through my self-doubt like a blade. Stop. Just stop. You are not wrong. The evidence is right there on your phone. They have been stealing from you for months while sitting at your dinner table and calling you mom. There is no innocent explanation for that. She was right, of course. But decades of making excuses for Matthew, of giving him the benefit of the doubt, of choosing to believe in his goodness despite mounting evidence to the contrary, those habits died hard. I loved them, I whispered. I know you did, Martha said, her voice gentle now. And that's what makes this so cruel. They used your love as a weapon against you. She sat back down and took my hands in hers. But here's what they didn't count on, sweetheart. They underestimated you. They think you're just a helpless old woman who will sit here quietly and let them bleed you dry. They have no idea what you're capable of when you finally decide to fight back. I looked into Martha's eyes that had seen me at my weakest moments and my strongest ones, eyes that had never lied to me or tried to manipulate me or seen me as anything other than a complete person deserving of respect and love. You really think I can do this? I asked. Martha smiled, and for the first time in days, I felt something like hope stirring in my chest. Honey, she said, you raised a child as a single mother after your husband died. You built a career, bought a house, saved for retirement, and still had enough left over to buy your son his own home. You are one of the strongest women I know. You just forgot that for a while because they needed you to forget it. She squeezed my hands. But now you're remembering. And they have no idea what's coming. I felt something shift inside me then. The last vestiges of the woman who had made excuses and swallowed her pride and accepted crumbs of affection in exchange for financial support, that woman was finally, completely gone. In her place sat someone harder. Someone who had been tested and betrayed and pushed too far. Someone who was done being quiet. Where do we start? I asked. Martha and I spent the rest of that morning like generals planning a war. She had pulled out a yellow legal pad, the same kind she used to use for parent conferences when particularly difficult situations required documentation, and was methodically writing down every step we needed to take. First priority, she said, her pen moving across the paper with decisive strokes, is stopping the bleeding. They can't steal what they can't access. I opened my laptop on the kitchen table, my fingers hovering over the keyboard with a mixture of determination and dread. For months, I had avoided looking too closely at my online accounts, trusting Emily to handle the complicated parts of digital banking. Now I realized that trust had been my biggest mistake. What if I can't figure out how to change everything? I asked, feeling suddenly overwhelmed by the technology that had seemed so mysterious when Emily first offered to help. Martha looked up from her notes, her expression stern but encouraging. Olivia, you're not helpless. You've been letting them convince you that you are, but you ran a household budget for 30 years before online banking even existed. You know money better than most people. The computer is just a tool. She was right. I had managed our family finances through Richard's illness, his death, Matthew's college expenses, and my own retirement planning. I had made smart investment decisions and careful budget choices that allowed me to buy my son a house. I wasn't financially illiterate, I had just been manipulated into believing I was. With Martha guiding me, I began the process of reclaiming my financial life. First, my primary checking account. I navigated to the settings page, my heart racing as I looked for the section marked Authorized Users. There it was, Emily Gardner, listed with full access privileges, added 6 months ago with the memo Emergency Assistance and Account Management. Emergency assistance. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. The only emergency had been Emily's urgent need to access my money without my knowledge. I clicked Remove User and watched Emily's name disappear from my account. It felt like deleting a virus from my computer, a necessary purging of something toxic that had been quietly corrupting my system. Next, my savings account. Same story. Emily's name, Emily's access, Emily's carefully constructed web of financial control. Gone. Then my investment accounts, my retirement funds, even my credit cards. Each time I found her name listed as an authorized user or emergency contact, each deletion felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been stolen. How many accounts did you give her access to? Martha asked, watching over my shoulder as name after name disappeared from my financial profiles. I don't know. She said it was easier to just add her to everything in case of emergencies. She made it sound like she was doing me a favor. She was doing herself a favor, Martha replied grimly. Look at this. She pointed to my laptop screen, where a new page had loaded showing my account activity in detail. The unauthorized withdrawals were even more extensive than I had initially realized. Small amounts from multiple accounts, carefully staggered to avoid triggering fraud alerts. But now that I knew what to look for, the pattern was unmistakable. Every withdrawal coincided with something I remembered: a dinner where Emily had seemed particularly sweet, a phone call where Matthew had been unusually attentive, a visit where they had both spent extra time asking about my health and well-being. They had been managing me. Every kindness had been calculated, every moment of attention designed to keep me compliant while they systematically robbed me. Look at this one, I said, pointing to a $1,200 withdrawal from 3 weeks ago. That was the day after Emily brought me flowers and said she was worried I seemed lonely. Martha's jaw tightened. Guilt and sympathy, followed immediately by theft. Classic manipulation. As we dug deeper into my accounts, the scope of their deception became even clearer. Emily hadn't just been taking money, she had been repositioning my assets. Investment funds had been quietly transferred to accounts with both their names on them. My retirement savings had been shifted to riskier investments that would benefit them more if something happened to me. She had been preparing for my death while pretending to care about my life. Olivia, Martha said quietly, you need to see this. She had opened another page on my laptop, something called a beneficiary management section that I had never noticed before. But Emily had noticed it. She had changed the beneficiaries on several of my accounts, removing the charities I had carefully selected and replacing them with her own name. Not Matthew's name. Emily's. My hands began to shake again, but this time it wasn't from hurt or shock. It was from rage. Pure, clean, clarifying rage. She was planning to cut Matthew out too, I said, my voice deadly quiet. Or maybe Matthew is more involved than you want to believe, Martha replied gently. Either way, they never planned for you to discover any of this. I stared at the screen, at the digital evidence of Emily's greed and calculation. She hadn't just stolen from me, she had systematically dismantled my financial security while wearing the mask of a caring daughter-in-law. But there was something else. Something that made my blood run even colder. In the notes section of one of my investment accounts, Emily had added a memo, account holder showing signs of cognitive decline. Family managing finances for safety. I read it twice before the full implication hit me. She's been building a case, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She's been documenting reasons why I can't manage my own money. Martha leaned closer to read the screen, her face darkening. That's not just theft, Olivia. That's elder abuse. She's been constructing a legal justification for taking complete control of your finances. The room started to spin. Emily hadn't just been stealing from me, she had been preparing to have me declared incompetent. She had been planning to take everything, legally and permanently, while portraying herself as my concerned caregiver. I thought about all the times she had gently corrected me when I misremembered a date or forgot someone's name. All the times she had completed sentences for me or answered questions on my behalf. All the times she had suggested I was getting confused about finances or technology. She hadn't been helping me. She had been building evidence against me. We need more than just account changes, Martha said, her voice taking on the steel tone she used when dealing with parents who tried to intimidate her. We need professional help. Legal help. She was right. This wasn't just about stopping the theft, it was about protecting myself from a campaign of systematic abuse that went far deeper than I had initially realized. Do you know any lawyers? I asked. Martha smiled grimly. Honey, I dealt with helicopter parents and custody battles for 30 years. I know the best family attorney in the state. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her contacts. Robert Dalton. He's handled cases like this before. Elder financial abuse, family manipulation, the whole ugly business. If anyone can help you, it's him. As Martha made the call to schedule an appointment, I continued staring at my laptop screen. Account after account showed Emily's fingerprints, her careful manipulation, her methodical preparation for complete financial control. But now those same digital records would become evidence against her. She had been so careful to document everything for her own protection. She had no idea that her meticulous record-keeping would become the rope that hanged her. I closed the laptop and looked at Martha, who was just finishing her call with the attorney. Tomorrow morning, she said. 10 a.m. He wants you to bring everything, account statements, transaction records, any communications you have with Emily about finances. I nodded, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, hope mixed with anticipation. Emily thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was about to learn that I had been watching her moves all along. Robert Dalton's office felt like a fortress. Thick mahogany furniture, walls lined with law books, and windows that looked out over the city with an air of quiet authority. This was the office of a man who had spent decades fighting battles for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Martha had insisted on coming with me, and I was grateful for her presence as we sat across from Dalton's imposing desk. He was younger than I had expected, maybe 55, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of steady gaze that made you feel both protected and slightly intimidated. Mrs. Gardner, he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had heard every possible variation of family betrayal, Martha has given me a brief overview of your situation. But I'd like to hear it directly from you. So for the third time in as many days, I told my story. But this time, it felt different. In my kitchen with Martha, it had felt like a confession. Here, in this office built for justice, it felt like testimony. Dalton listened without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad that looked remarkably similar to Martha's. When I finished, he set down his pen and studied the documents I had brought, printouts of account statements, transaction records, screenshots of Emily's unauthorized access to my financial accounts. How long did you say this pattern of withdrawals has been going on? He asked. At least 6 months that I can document. But I suspect it started earlier. I wasn't paying close enough attention. Don't blame yourself for that, Dalton said firmly. Elder financial abuse relies on trust and the abuser's ability to gradually normalize their behavior. The fact that you noticed and took action puts you ahead of most victims in your situation. Victims. The word hit me like a slap. I had never thought of myself as a victim before. I had been a widow, a mother, a woman who had worked hard and saved carefully and tried to do right by her family. But a victim? Mrs. Gardner, Dalton continued, based on what you've shown me and what Martha has told me, this isn't just theft. This appears to be a systematic campaign of elder financial abuse with intent to assume guardianship. Guardianship? My voice came out as a croak. Martha reached over and squeezed my hand. Dalton leaned forward, his expression grave. The memo your daughter-in-law added to your investment account, the one about cognitive decline, that's not casual documentation. That's evidence being built for a legal case. If someone were to petition the court to declare you incompetent and assume guardianship over your affairs, those kinds of notes would be presented as supporting evidence. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what he was saying. You mean she was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent? It's a common strategy in elder financial abuse cases, Dalton explained. The abuser gradually isolates the victim, takes control of their finances under the guise of helping, then documents every moment of confusion or forgetfulness as evidence of declining mental capacity. Eventually, they petition for legal guardianship, which gives them complete control over the victim's person and property. I thought about all the times Emily had gently corrected me, all the times she had suggested I was getting confused, all the times she had taken tasks out of my hands because they were too complicated for me to handle. She hadn't been protecting me from confusion, she had been creating it. The good news, Dalton continued, is that you discovered this before any legal proceedings were initiated. And more importantly, you took decisive action to protect yourself. The fact that you were able to identify the problem, research the evidence, and seek legal counsel demonstrates exactly the kind of mental competency that would make any guardianship petition impossible to sustain. But what about the money they've already taken? Martha asked. Dalton's expression hardened. That's theft, plain and simple. The fact that Mrs. Gardner gave them authorized access to her accounts doesn't give them permission to steal from those accounts. Every unauthorized withdrawal is a separate felony. A separate felony. I tried to calculate how many withdrawals I had found. Dozens. Maybe more. What are my options? I asked. Several, Dalton replied, pulling out a fresh legal pad. First, we can pursue criminal charges. Elder financial abuse is a serious felony in the state, punishable by significant prison time and mandatory restitution. Prison time. The thought of Emily in handcuffs, of Matthew possibly facing criminal charges, should have upset me. Instead, I felt a cold satisfaction. Second, he continued, we can pursue civil remedies. Sue for the return of all stolen funds plus damages, legal fees, and punitive awards. And third? Dalton smiled grimly. We can do both. Criminal and civil cases can proceed simultaneously. My experience is that the threat of criminal prosecution often motivates defendants to cooperate more fully in civil settlement negotiations. I looked at Martha, who nodded encouragingly. There's something else we need to discuss, Dalton said. The house. My stomach dropped. What about it? You mentioned that you gifted them a fully paid house worth approximately $350,000. When did this transfer take place? 4 months ago. And was this gift made freely, without coercion or undue influence? I started to say yes, then stopped. Had it been freely made? Or had I been manipulated into it by months of Emily's careful psychological pressure, by her suggestions that I was becoming forgetful and might not be able to manage such a large asset, by her promises that I would always be welcome there? I don't know anymore, I admitted. Dalton nodded. That's an honest answer. And it's the right answer. Because based on the pattern of financial abuse you've described, there's a strong argument that the house transfer was made under duress and undue influence. What does that mean? It means we can potentially void the transfer. Get the house back. The words hit me like lightning. Get the house back. The house I had bought with my life savings, the house I had signed over because I believed in family and love and the bonds between mother and child. The house they were probably planning to mortgage or sell to fund their lifestyle while I sat alone in my empty nest, forgotten and discarded. Can we really do that? I asked. It won't be easy, Dalton warned. We'll need to prove that the transfer was the result of systematic manipulation and abuse. But given the evidence you've already gathered, the unauthorized financial access, the documented pattern of theft, the notes about your supposed cognitive decline, I think we have a strong case. Martha was grinning like a wolf. They thought they were so clever, didn't they? All that careful documentation they did to build a case against you, it's going to be used to build a case against them. Dalton pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his calendar. I want to move quickly on this. Every day we wait is another day they have to cover their tracks or potentially dispose of assets. Can you be here tomorrow morning to sign the necessary paperwork? What kind of paperwork? A petition to void the house transfer, restraining orders to prevent them from accessing or disposing of any assets, and if you're willing, criminal complaints for elder financial abuse. I thought about the text message that had started all of this. About being told I wasn't family. About Emily's sweet smiles and calculated cruelty. About Matthew's willful blindness to what his wife was doing to his own mother. I'm willing, I said. Dalton smiled, the first genuinely warm expression I had seen from him. Then let's get your life back, Mrs. Gardner. As we left his office, Martha was practically bouncing with excitement. Did you see his face when you said you were willing to file criminal charges? She asked as we walked to the elevator. That man loves his job. Martha, I said as the elevator doors closed, what if Matthew really didn't know? What if Emily was manipulating him too? Martha studied my face for a long moment. Then he'll have to prove that to a judge, she said gently. Either way, you can't keep sacrificing yourself to protect him from the consequences of his choices. She was right. For too many years, I had chosen Matthew's comfort over my own well-being. I had chosen peace over justice, family harmony over personal dignity. Not anymore. 3 days later, I was sitting in my kitchen when fate delivered the perfect gift. A white envelope slid under my front door while I was having my morning coffee. I heard the soft whisper of paper against hardwood and found it there when I went to investigate, pristine, unmarked except for a yellow sticky note in Emily's familiar handwriting. Just sign whenever you're ready, Mom. It'll make everything so much easier while we're away. Red Heart Emily. My hands were steady as I opened the envelope. After everything Dalton had explained, after all the research Martha and I had done, I knew exactly what I was looking at before I even unfolded the documents. Power of attorney papers. Complete, irrevocable, permanent. But these weren't the simple emergency authorization papers Emily had convinced me to sign months ago. These were comprehensive legal documents that would give her absolute control over every aspect of my life, my finances, my medical decisions, my living arrangements, even my ability to revoke the power of attorney itself. I read through them carefully, my coffee growing cold as the full scope of Emily's plan became clear. Buried in the legal language were clauses that would allow her to sell my house, liquidate my investments, even commit me to a care facility if she deemed it medically necessary. She wasn't just trying to steal my money anymore. She was trying to erase me entirely. The timing was perfect, of course. They were leaving for their cruise that afternoon, the cruise I wasn't invited to, the cruise they had probably booked with my stolen money. Emily expected me to sign these papers in their absence, trusting and compliant as always, giving her complete legal control while they floated across the ocean celebrating their victory. I set the papers down and reached for my phone. Dalton, came the crisp voice on the other end. It's Olivia Gardner. Emily just delivered the smoking gun. 20 minutes later, I was back in Dalton's office, the power of attorney documents spread across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. This is incredible, he said, photographing each page with methodical precision. She's handed us everything we need to prove premeditation and intent. What do you mean? Look at the date these were prepared, he said, pointing to the bottom of the first page. 2 weeks ago. She had these drawn up by an attorney, a different attorney, not me, 2 weeks before they told you that you weren't invited on their cruise. The implication hit me like a physical blow. She planned the whole thing. Exactly. The cruise exclusion, the timing, even this sweet little note about signing whenever you're ready, it's all calculated. She wanted you hurt and isolated when she presented these papers. Emotional manipulation to ensure compliance. Dalton leaned back in his chair, his expression grim with professional satisfaction. Mrs. Gardner, this isn't just elder abuse anymore. This is conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft by deception, and quite possibly conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. False imprisonment? These documents would have given her the legal right to control where you live, potentially against your will. If she had succeeded in getting you to sign them, she could have moved you into a care facility and taken control of your house and assets without any legal recourse available to you. I stared at the papers that would have been my legal death sentence, signed with my own hand. What do we do now? Now we spring the trap, Dalton said with a smile that would have made a shark proud. They think you're going to sign these and sit quietly while they enjoy their cruise. Instead, we're going to use their absence to our advantage. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. I listened as he spoke to court clerks, private investigators, and other attorneys, setting in motion a legal machine that would fundamentally reshape my life and theirs. The restraining orders will be filed this afternoon, he explained after hanging up. By the time they return from their cruise, Emily will be legally prohibited from accessing any of your accounts or properties. The house transfer reversal petition will be filed simultaneously. What about criminal charges? I'm meeting with the district attorney's office tomorrow morning. With these power of attorney documents as evidence of intent, plus all the financial records you've gathered, I'm confident they'll authorize charges for elder financial abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. As I left Dalton's office that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: power. Not the kind of power that comes from having money or influence, but the deeper power that comes from refusing to be a victim anymore. I drove home slowly, taking a detour past the house I had bought for Matthew and Emily. It looked perfect in the afternoon sunlight, the lawn neatly trimmed, the flower beds Emily had insisted on, the expensive outdoor furniture I had helped them pick out. From the outside, it looked like the home of a happy young couple building their future together. But I knew the truth now. It was a house built on lies, furnished with stolen money, and occupied by people who saw love as weakness to be exploited. Not for much longer. That evening, Martha came over to keep me company. We sat in my living room, the unsigned power of attorney papers spread across my coffee table like defeated enemies. I still can't believe the timing, Martha said, shaking her head. They leave for their cruise today, expecting you to sign away your entire life while they're gone. She probably planned to call me from the ship, I said. Some sweet, concerned check-in to make sure I had taken care of that paperwork she left for me. And if you had signed it? I thought about that alternative timeline, the version of events where I remained trusting and compliant, where I signed those papers and waited quietly for their return. I would have woken up next week to find out I no longer legally owned my own life. Martha poured herself another cup of tea from the pot we had brewed. You know what I keep thinking about? That memo Emily put in your investment account about cognitive decline. She's been building this case for months, documenting every time you forgot a name or asked her to repeat something. Making me doubt myself, I added. Making me feel like I really was becoming incompetent. Gaslighting, Martha said firmly. Classic psychological abuse. Make the victim question their own reality so they become dependent on the abuser's version of truth. I looked at the woman who had been my friend for 30 years, who had seen me at my strongest and my weakest, who had never once treated me like I was anything less than completely capable. Martha, can I ask you something? Of course. In all the years you've known me, have you ever thought I was losing my mental capacity? Be honest. Martha set down her teacup and looked at me with the intensity of someone delivering a life-or-death diagnosis. Olivia Gardner, you are one of the sharpest women I know. You managed your family's finances through your husband's death and your son's college years. You made smart investment decisions that allowed you to retire comfortably and still buy your son a house. You recognized financial abuse when you saw it, gathered evidence, found legal representation, and made strategic decisions to protect yourself. She leaned forward, her voice fierce with conviction. The only cognitive decline you've shown is in your ability to recognize your own worth. And that wasn't age or illness, that was emotional abuse designed to make you forget how strong you are. Tears stunned my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of finally seeing myself clearly after months of looking through the distorted mirror Emily had held up to me. They really thought they could break me, I said. No, Martha replied. They thought you were already broken. They thought years of grief and loneliness and desperate love for your son had made you permanently vulnerable. She smiled, that fierce grin I remembered from her principal days when she was about to deliver consequences to a particularly arrogant student. They have no idea they just woke up a sleeping dragon. The private investigator arrived at my house on a gray Thursday morning, looking nothing like what I had expected. James Morrison was a soft-spoken man in his early 60s, wearing a cardigan that made him look more like a retired librarian than someone who specialized in financial fraud cases. But Dalton had assured me that Morrison was the best in the business at tracing money and uncovering financial deception. "Mrs. Gardner," he said, settling into my kitchen chair with a briefcase full of documents, "I've spent the past week following the digital trail your daughter-in-law left behind. What I found is extensive." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Let's start with the obvious, the unauthorized withdrawals from your accounts. You identified approximately $18,000 over 6 months, correct?" I nodded. "That was just the beginning," Morrison said grimly. "The actual total is closer to $43,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $43,000. Nearly half my annual income, stolen so gradually and carefully that I had only noticed a fraction of it. How is that possible?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Morrison pulled out a spreadsheet covered in highlighted numbers. She was very sophisticated in her approach. Multiple small withdrawals from different accounts, cash advances on credit cards you didn't know she had access to, even automatic bill payments rerouted to accounts she controlled. He pointed to a section of the spreadsheet. "For example, your electric bill. For the past 4 months, instead of being paid directly to the utility company, it was being paid to a secondary account Emily set up, supposedly for household expense management. She would then pay the actual bill and pocket the difference by inflating the amounts she claimed you owed. She was stealing from my utility payments? Among other things. She also set up a fake property management company and began charging you monthly maintenance fees for your own house. $500 a month for lawn care and home maintenance that you were already paying for separately." I felt sick. The scope of Emily's deception went far beyond anything I had imagined. She hadn't just been stealing money, she had been creating an elaborate financial fiction where I was paying for services I didn't need to companies that didn't exist. "But that's not the worst part," Morrison continued. "She's been preparing for something much bigger." He pulled out another set of documents. 3 weeks ago, Emily applied for a second mortgage on the house you bought for them. She listed herself as the primary owner and you as a cosigner who had given verbal consent due to early-stage dementia concerns. My blood went cold. She told the bank I had dementia? Not explicitly. But she provided documentation suggesting you were no longer capable of managing complex financial decisions. The same notes she added to your investment accounts, plus statements from what she claimed were medical professionals. What medical professionals? I haven't seen a doctor in months except for routine checkups. Morrison's expression darkened. That's what makes this particularly concerning. The medical statements appear to be fabricated. I'm still investigating, but it looks like she may have forged documents from healthcare providers you've never even seen. The room started to spin. Emily hadn't just been stealing from me and manipulating me, she had been constructing an elaborate legal fiction to justify taking everything I owned. How much was the second mortgage for? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. $200,000. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table. $200,000 borrowed against a house I had bought for them, using forged medical documents claiming I was mentally incompetent. The good news, Morrison continued, is that the mortgage application was rejected. The bank's underwriting department flagged some inconsistencies in the documentation. But Mrs. Gardner, this shows clear intent to commit major fraud. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. I also found this. It was a screenshot of a text message conversation between Emily and someone named Marcus. The messages were dated just 2 days ago, while they were supposedly on their romantic cruise. Emily, the old lady still hasn't signed the POA papers. Starting to worry she's getting suspicious. Marcus, don't panic. Stick to the plan. Once you get full legal control, you can clean out everything and blame it on her medical condition. Emily, what if she refuses to sign? Marcus, then we move to Plan B. You've got enough documentation to petition for emergency guardianship. Judge will appoint you as guardian, especially with the medical evidence. Emily, and then? Marcus, then she becomes your legal ward and you control everything. House, accounts, even where she lives. Game over. I stared at the phone screen, reading the messages over and over. Emily had been texting someone about me while supposedly enjoying her honeymoon cruise with my son. She had been strategizing about how to steal my entire life while I sat at home missing them. Who is Marcus? I asked. That's still under investigation, Morrison replied. But based on the conversation patterns, I suspect he's either another family member involved in the scheme or possibly a lawyer helping her navigate the legal aspects of elder abuse. The betrayal went deeper than just Emily and Matthew. There were other people involved, other conspirators helping to plan my destruction. Mr. Morrison, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, what would have happened if I had signed those power of attorney papers? Within a week, possibly less, they would have begun liquidating your assets. Your house would have been sold or heavily mortgaged, your investment accounts emptied, your retirement savings transferred to accounts they controlled. By the time you realized what was happening, everything would have been gone and you would have had no legal recourse because you would have signed away your right to challenge their decisions. And if I had refused to sign? Morrison's expression grew even more serious. Based on these text messages and the medical documentation they've been fabricating, they would have petitioned the court for emergency guardianship, claiming you were a danger to yourself due to cognitive decline. With Emily as your court-appointed guardian, the end result would have been the same, complete control over your person and property. I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what had almost happened to me. Either way, whether I complied or resisted, Emily had planned to win. She had been playing a game where every move led to my complete destruction. There's one more thing, Morrison said gently. I need to ask you about your son Matthew's involvement. My heart clenched. What about it? Some of the financial transactions required his signature as well as Emily's. The second mortgage application, for example, listed him as a co-applicant. And he hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say. And what? The text messages I showed you weren't just between Emily and this Marcus person. There's a group chat that includes your son. He showed me his phone again. This time, the screenshot showed a three-way conversation with Emily, Marcus, and a contact listed as Matt. Matt, Mom seemed suspicious when we told her about the cruise. Think she's catching on? Emily, doesn't matter. We're too close to stop now. Once she signs the POA papers, it's over. Marcus, and if she doesn't sign? Matt, then we go with your guardianship plan. I'll back up Emily's story about Mom's mental decline. Been documenting examples for months. I closed my eyes, but the words were burned into my retinas. My son, my own son, had been actively participating in the plan to steal my life. He hadn't been a passive victim of Emily's manipulation. He had been a willing conspirator. Mrs. Gardner, Morrison said softly, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear about your son. I opened my eyes and looked at him. No, I said, my voice steady despite the devastation in my heart. But it's what I needed to hear. For months, I had been making excuses for Matthew, convincing myself that he was being manipulated by Emily, that he didn't really understand what was happening. But the evidence was right there in black and white. He had been documenting my supposed mental decline. He had been planning to lie in court about my competency. He had been willing to destroy his own mother for money. What happens next? I asked. Morrison closed his briefcase. I'll have a complete report ready for Attorney Dalton by tomorrow morning. With this evidence, the financial theft, the forged medical documents, the text messages showing premeditation, we have more than enough for serious criminal charges. As he left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my family's betrayal. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't sad. I was furious. And fury, I was learning, was a much more useful emotion than heartbreak. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't questioning myself or making excuses for people who didn't deserve them. The evidence was overwhelming, the betrayal was complete, and my course of action was crystal clear. They had declared war on me while I was still trying to play house. But now I was ready to fight back. I called Dalton at exactly 8 a.m. "I've reviewed Morrison's report," he said without preamble. "Mrs. Gardner, this is one of the most comprehensive elder abuse cases I've ever seen. The level of premeditation and conspiracy is staggering. What are our next steps?" "I'm meeting with District Attorney Patricia Hayes this afternoon. With the evidence we have, the financial records, the forged medical documents, the text messages showing conspiracy, I'm confident she'll authorize criminal charges against both Emily and Matthew." Both Emily and Matthew. Hearing it stated so matter-of-factly sent a chill through me, but not the kind of chill I expected. It wasn't sadness or regret. It was satisfaction. "What kind of charges?" I asked. "Elder financial abuse in the first degree, which is a Class B felony carrying up to 10 years in prison. Conspiracy to commit fraud, another felony. Forgery of medical documents, which adds federal charges since they cross state lines to find healthcare providers to impersonate. And depending on how deep this Marcus person's involvement goes, potentially racketeering charges." Racketeering. My family had become a criminal enterprise with me as their target. "There's something else," Dalton continued. "I want to move forward with the civil asset recovery while they're still out of the country. Strike while they can't respond or try to hide assets." "What does that mean?" "Emergency court orders to freeze all accounts associated with them, prevent them from accessing or selling any property, and most importantly, void the house transfer and return full ownership to you." My heart started racing. "You can really get the house back?" "With the evidence we have showing the transfer was made under duress and as part of a systematic fraud scheme, I believe so. But we need to move fast. The moment they return from their cruise and realize you didn't sign those power of attorney papers, they're going to know something is wrong. We want all the legal protections in place before they have a chance to react." I thought about Emily and Matthew floating somewhere on a cruise ship, probably toasting their upcoming victory with champagne bought with my stolen money, completely unaware that their entire world was about to collapse. "Do it," I said. "File everything. Mrs. Gardner, once we start this process, there's no going back. Criminal charges will be filed. Your son will likely face prison time. Your relationship with both of them will be permanently destroyed." I closed my eyes and saw Matthew's face in my mind, not the scheming adult who had helped plan my destruction, but the little boy I had raised, the child I had loved with every fiber of my being. Then I opened my eyes and looked at the power of attorney papers still sitting on my kitchen table, the documents that would have erased my existence. "Mr. Dalton," I said, "they destroyed our relationship the moment they decided to steal my life. I'm just making it official." 3 hours later, I was back in Dalton's office, this time accompanied by Martha and a court stenographer. We were creating a formal deposition, my complete statement about the abuse, theft, and conspiracy, which would become part of the official court record. "State your name for the record," the stenographer said. "Olivia Margaret Gardner." "And you are giving this statement of your own free will?" "I am." For the next 2 hours, I told my story again, but this time every word was being officially recorded. Every detail of Emily's gradual takeover of my finances. Every instance of Matthew's complicity. Every lie they had told and every dollar they had stolen. When we finished, Dalton spread a series of legal documents across his conference table. "These are the emergency motions we're filing this afternoon," he explained. "Asset freezing orders, restraining orders preventing them from accessing any property associated with you, and the petition to void the house transfer." I signed my name on document after document, each signature feeling like a small act of reclamation. "The criminal complaints will be filed simultaneously," Dalton continued. "By law, they'll be notified within 48 hours of their return to the country. But the civil orders go into effect immediately." "What does that mean practically?" "It means that by tonight, the house you bought for them will legally belong to you again. Their access to any accounts with your money will be completely severed. And they'll be prohibited from disposing of any assets that might be subject to restitution." Martha, who had been quietly taking notes throughout the meeting, looked up. "What about when they try to come home? To the house?" Dalton smiled grimly. "They'll find the locks changed and a court order taped to the door explaining that they're prohibited from entering the property. If they attempt to enter anyway, it becomes criminal trespass and they can be arrested on the spot." The image of Emily and Matthew standing outside the house they thought they owned, reading a court order that stripped them of everything, filled me with a fierce joy I didn't know I was capable of feeling. "There's one more thing," Dalton said, pulling out his phone. "I got a call from Morrison an hour ago. He's identified Marcus." My pulse quickened. "Who is he?" "Marcus Chin, a lawyer who was disbarred 3 years ago for financial fraud. Apparently, he's been running a network that helps people commit elder financial abuse, providing fake medical documentation, legal advice on how to manipulate guardianship laws, even connecting conspirators with each other." "So this wasn't Emily's original plan?" "No. She found Chin through online forums where people discuss managing difficult elderly relatives. He's been coaching her through the entire process: how to gradually gain access to your accounts, how to document supposed cognitive decline, how to set up the legal framework for a guardianship petition." The betrayal somehow felt both more and less personal. Emily hadn't just spontaneously decided to steal from me, she had sought out professional help from a criminal organization that specialized in destroying elderly people's lives. "The FBI is involved now," Dalton continued. "Chen's operation appears to span multiple states and dozens of victims. Your case might be the evidence they need to shut down the entire network." I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what I had uncovered. What started as a hurtful text message about a cruise had revealed a sophisticated criminal conspiracy that went far beyond my own family. "Mrs. Gardner," Dalton said gently, "I want you to understand what you've accomplished here. By recognizing the abuse and taking action, you haven't just saved yourself, you've potentially saved dozens of other elderly people from being victimized by this network." As we left the courthouse that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: pride. Not the hollow pride of being useful to ungrateful people, but the deep satisfaction of standing up for myself and fighting back against injustice. Martha linked her arm through mine as we walked to our cars. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about that question. How did I feel? Sad about losing my son? Angry about the betrayal? Frightened about the legal battle ahead? All of those things, but something else too. "Free," I said finally. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free." Martha smiled. "That's because you are. You just took your life back." That night, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, looking at the empty spaces where their photos used to hang. Tomorrow, Emily and Matthew would wake up on their cruise ship, probably planning to call and check whether I had signed away my life yet. Instead, they would find their accounts frozen and their crimes exposed. I raised my teacup in a small, private toast. "Game over," I whispered to the empty room. Their cruise ship docked on a sunny Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after Emily had slipped those power of attorney papers under my door. I wasn't there to witness their homecoming, but Morrison had positioned himself strategically in the port parking lot with a camera. He called me at 9:47 a.m. "They're off the ship," he said. Emily looks relaxed, tanned. Your son is checking his phone. They have no idea what's waiting for them. I sat in my kitchen, in my house, surrounded by the peace I had built for myself, and imagined them driving home. Emily probably chatting about the cruise, maybe asking Matthew to call me to check on those important papers she had left for me to sign. They would be expecting to find a compliant, broken woman who had quietly signed away her life while they sipped champagne on the deck of a cruise ship. Instead, they were about to discover that their victim had become their worst nightmare. Morrison called again at 11:23 a.m. They just pulled into the driveway of the house, he said. Emily's out of the car first, heading for the front door. She's trying her key. I could picture it perfectly, Emily's confident stride, her expectation of walking into the house I had bought for them, the house she had been planning to leverage for another $200,000 mortgage. Key doesn't work, Morrison continued, his voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. She's trying it again. Now Matthew's getting out of the car. He looks confused. The locks had been changed yesterday, per Dalton's instructions. New deadbolts, new doorknobs, new security system. The house was mine again, legally and literally. Emily's walking around to the back door now, Morrison reported. Matthews, he found the court order taped to the front door. He's reading it. Mrs. Gardner, I wish you could see his face. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine Matthew's expression as he read the legal document that stripped away everything he thought he owned. The house, the accounts, the control over my life, all of it gone while he was floating on a cruise ship, planning my destruction. Emily's back from trying the back door, Morrison continued. Matthew's showing her the court order. She's screaming. Actually screaming. The neighbors are starting to come outside. Emily's perfect composure, her carefully crafted image of the concerned daughter-in-law, finally cracking under the weight of reality. After months of manipulation and sweet lies, she was showing her true face. What's Matthew doing? I asked. He's on his phone. Probably calling you. As if on cue, my phone began ringing. Matthew's name appeared on the screen, the same name that used to make me smile with joy, that now made my stomach clench with a mixture of sadness and steel resolve. I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started ringing again. I let it ring again. The third time, I answered. Mom? Matthew's voice was strained, panicked. Mom, what's going on? We can't get into our house and there's some kind of legal paper on the door that says. I know what it says, Matthew. My voice was calm, steady. The voice of someone who was no longer afraid, no longer desperate to maintain peace at any cost. I don't understand, he continued, his voice rising. The paper says something about asset freezing and criminal charges and theft, I interrupted. Don't forget theft, Matthew. $43,000 stolen from my accounts while you and Emily smiled at me across my dinner table. Silence on the other end. Mom, I think there's been some kind of mistake. The only mistake, I said quietly, was trusting you. We never stole anything. Emily was just helping you manage things because you were getting confused. Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended, but it felt good. It felt powerful. I know about the text messages, Matthew. I know about Marcuston. I know about the forged medical documents. I know about all of it. Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Smaller. The voice of someone who had just realized their lies were useless. Mom, please, let us just talk about this. Let us come inside and explain. You're not coming inside, Matthew. That house belongs to me now. It always did, legally speaking, but now even the paperwork reflects that reality. You can't do this, Emily's voice came through the phone, sharp and desperate. She had grabbed the phone from Matthew. We have rights. We're family. I almost laughed at the irony. Family? Emily, you tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could steal everything I own. You forged medical documents. You were planning to put me in a care facility against my will. That's not family, that's predation. You're being ridiculous, Emily snapped, her mask of sweetness finally completely gone. You signed papers giving us authority over your accounts. We were just managing your money because you're too old and confused to handle it yourself. I never signed papers authorizing you to steal from me, I replied calmly. And the FBI seems very interested in your friend Marcus and his network of elder abuse schemes. The line went quiet. That's right, Emily. The FBI. This isn't just about you stealing from one confused old woman anymore. You're part of a federal criminal conspiracy. When Emily spoke again, her voice was pure venom. You'll regret this, you bitter old witch. When this is over, when the lawyers get done with you, you'll have nothing left. Nothing. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Emily, I already had nothing left. You made sure of that when you decided I wasn't family enough for your cruise. The difference is, now you have nothing left too. I hung up. Morrison called me back an hour later. They've left the house, he said. Emily was crying, real tears this time, not the crocodile tears she's been using on you. Matthew looked like someone had hit him with a truck. Where did they go? Hotel, probably. Mrs. Gardner, they tried to get into the house through a window. I have photos of Emily attempting to break in. When that didn't work, Matthew tried to remove the court order from the door. More photos. Breaking and entering. Tampering with court documents. They were adding charges to their list even as their world collapsed around them. That evening, Dalton called with an update. The DA approved all charges, he said. Elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. Both Emily and Matthew will be arrested tomorrow morning. Both of them? The text messages make Matthew's involvement clear. He wasn't a passive victim of Emily's manipulation, he was an active participant in the conspiracy. I closed my eyes and saw Matthew as a little boy, running to me with skinned knees, trusting me to make everything better. Then I opened them and saw the power of attorney papers on my table, the documents that would have erased my entire existence. I understand, I said. 3 months later, I was sitting in my garden when Martha brought me the newspaper. Front page, she said, settling into the chair beside me. The headline read, FBI breaks up elder abuse network, dozens arrested in multi-state operation. Emily's photo was there, along with Marcus Chin and several other conspirators. Matthew's photo was smaller, buried in the article about family members who participated in systematic financial abuse of elderly relatives. How do you feel seeing it? Martha asked. I thought about that question. Matthew had pled guilty to avoid a trial and was serving 18 months in minimum security prison. Emily had tried to fight the charges and was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. The house was officially mine again, along with every penny they had stolen and significant additional damages. But more than that, I had my life back. My dignity. My sense of self-worth. My understanding that I deserved better than being useful to people who saw me as an obstacle to their greed. I feel like myself again, I said finally. Martha smiled. Good. Because you're one hell of a woman, Olivia Gardner. It just took a while for you to remember that. As the sun set over my garden, behind my house, filled with flowers I had chosen, I thought about the text message that had started all of this. You're not invited. My wife wants to keep it just family. They were right about one thing, I wasn't their family. I was something much more valuable, I was my own person. And I would never forget that again.